In a world where you don't need a pokeball to own a demon, what kind of demon would you want? A powerful armored bear that could intimidate everyone in the room, a snow leopard that could join you on wild adventures through the frozen north, or a tiny golden monkey that was clever, quick and full of tricks. Everyone in this world was born with a demon by their side. The two were connected for life. If one died, the other couldn't survive either. And before their human reached adulthood, a demon could change its form whenever it wanted, until the human grew up, when it finally took a permanent form. Based on its owner's soul, Lyra was an orphan, and she had grown up with her uncle Asriel, but he was always away on expeditions. So Lyra's demon Pantalaimon had always stayed by her side. One day, Lyra secretly sneaked into the college, but she accidentally stumbled onto a dangerous conspiracy. She saw a church agent secretly drugging a drink, and the person they wanted to kill was her own uncle. The church was the most powerful organization in this world. If they were willing to use such dirty tricks, Asriel must have discovered something they desperately wanted to hide. Realizing how serious the situation was, Asriel immediately called an academic meeting, and publicly revealed everything he had discovered. In the Arctic, he had found a mysterious substance called dust. Dust could use the power of demons to open a gateway to parallel worlds. The truth was, the church had known about dust and other worlds for years. They could even travel between different worlds. Then they brought back technology from those worlds, and passed it off as gifts from God. If Asriel kept researching dust, he would eventually expose their lies. So to protect their power, the church secretly kidnapped countless children, and used them in horrifying experiments. They were trying to find a way to cut the connection between children and their demons. That way, no one would ever be able to challenge their authority again. Meanwhile, Asriel wanted to continue studying dust, so he had to return to the Arctic immediately. Before leaving, he had no choice but to leave Lyra in the care of the college master. The recent disappearances of children had thrown everyone into a panic. Lyra was also forbidden from leaving the college, so she could only sneak onto the roof to meet her friend Roger. The two even promised that if one of them ever got into trouble, the other would come to the rescue. Just then, the dorm supervisor suddenly started calling for Lyra. For some reason, the church had specifically invited her to a dinner party that night. Lyra sat at the dinner table completely bored, while the college master kept lecturing her about being too wild and troublesome. Then, an elegant woman with a powerful presence walked over. She was Mrs. Coulter, and she was the one who had specifically asked to meet Lyra. Even though they had never met before, Mrs. Coulter acted strangely familiar with her, and the biggest surprise was, she was actually an old acquaintance of Asriel's. The two of them had once worked together in the Arctic, and had even visited the Armored Bear Kingdom together. Mrs. Coulter told Lyra that armored bears were intelligent creatures just like humans, but unlike humans, they didn't have demons. Lyra immediately became fascinated, so Mrs. Coulter invited her to travel with her to the Arctic. Since the church had personally made the request, the college master didn't dare refuse, but he had promised Asriel that he would protect Lyra. So before she left, he secretly called Lyra aside, and handed her a golden compass. It was the only remaining alethiometer in the world. Ask it a question, and it could reveal the answer. Lyra's father had given it to the college to protect many years ago. Now, it was finally returning to its rightful owner. Before Lyra left, the college master gave her one final warning. She could never let the church know about the compass. Lyra followed Mrs. Coulter to her mansion, and soon found herself attending one party after another. But half a month passed, and they still hadn't mentioned the Arctic even once. Instead, Mrs. Coulter gave Lyra a long list of rules. The strangest one was simple. She was forbidden from entering the room at the end of the second floor. Lyra couldn't figure out why Mrs. Coulter was keeping her locked up, but Pan had a different idea. If they weren't allowed inside, they should definitely take a look. So Lyra and Pan secretly broke into the room, and discovered a terrifying secret. One document contained records of experiments designed to cut children away from their demons. And among the missing children, Lyra found the names of Roger and Billy. Just then, Lyra heard Mrs. Coulter coming. She quickly ran back to her room, but when she opened the door, she found Mrs. Coulter's demon had already discovered the golden compass. Pan immediately transformed into a bird, snatched the compass back, and flew away. Lyra followed close behind, and climbed out the window. She was still in danger herself, but all she could think about was rescuing Roger and Billy. Lyra and Pan ran as fast as they could, but eventually, they were surrounded by pursuers. Pan was also left unable to move. Then, several arrows suddenly flew through the air, and took down every pursuer in an instant. The people who saved them were the Egyptians, and the woman leading them was Roger's mother. Ever since children started disappearing, the Egyptians had been secretly investigating the truth, and they had recently started suspecting Mrs. Coulter. They never expected to find Lyra during the investigation, but they ended up saving her instead. They took Lyra back to their ship, where several of Asriel's old friends were waiting. One of them was an old bearded leader, and he told Lyra a secret. The witches had already made a prophecy about her. Lyra was a very special child. Most people needed to study piles of ancient books just to understand part of the prophecy. But Lyra was different. She had a rare gift. All she needed was the right method, and she could use the golden compass directly. With Father Korum's guidance, Lyra picked up the compass, and began asking a question in her mind. She slowly closed her eyes, and tried to connect with the compass. The next moment, she saw a world filled with golden dust. She also saw a set of coordinates, and the missing children Roger and Billy. The group immediately set out. They were determined to rescue every missing child, but the church wanted the golden compass, so they sent mechanical assassins after them. Two mechanical insects quickly found Lyra, and immediately launched an attack. Their target was the compass in her hands. Lyra refused to back down, and knocked one of them away. Pan immediately turned around to protect the compass. Then, Farder Coram grabbed a cup, and trapped the other mechanical insect underneath it. These mechanical insects were neither demons nor living creatures, and their tails were coated with a poison that could knock people unconscious. After seeing just how ruthless the church could be, the group knew they couldn't waste another second. They immediately set their course for the Arctic, and headed north at full speed. Just then, a mysterious figure suddenly landed on the ship. It was the witch who had once prophesied Lyra's fate, and through the golden compass, Lyra discovered her identity. Her name was Serafina Piccola, and she was also an old acquaintance of Farder Coram, but she hadn't come to reminisce. She had come specifically to guide Lyra. Before entering the Arctic, Lyra first had to visit a small harbor town, because two important allies were waiting for her there. Following the witch's directions, the ship soon arrived at the town. Lyra had just started looking for clues, when one of her future allies suddenly found her first. He immediately recognized the golden compass in her hand, and suggested that if she really planned to go north, she would need an aeronaut, and an armored bear. Lyra immediately became interested. The witch had already told the locals about the prophecy, and had specifically asked them to wait for Lyra's arrival. Following the clues, Lyra and Farder Coram found an armored bear working in a tavern, but the bear wasn't wearing the legendary armor. Still, the scars on his face made one thing obvious. He had seen plenty of battles, so how had a battle-hardened armored bear ended up working in a tavern? The answer was simple. After he got drunk, humans stole his armor, and without his armor, an armored bear could no longer fight. Lyra soon learned that the bear's name was Irek Bernizon. He had once been the rightful prince of the armored bears, but when he was at his weakest, his enemy defeated him, and stole his throne. Irek was eventually forced into exile, and became a broken bear without his armor. Lyra used the golden compass to uncover the truth, and the people behind everything were connected to the church. They had secretly hidden Irek's armor inside the church in the center of town. Once Irek learned the truth, he immediately charged toward the church, but soldiers quickly arrived, and surrounded the building. Just as Irek was about to lose control, Lyra rushed out and stopped him. To thank Lyra for helping him recover his armor, Irek decided to let go of the past, but the soldiers surrounding them still refused to back down. Then, a loaded gun was suddenly pointed at Irek's head. Fortunately, Lee Scoresby arrived just in time with the Egyptians, and the soldiers were forced to lower their weapons. Lyra had finally gathered all the allies from the witch's prophecy, and now, she could finally head to the Arctic, to rescue the missing children, and find her uncle Asriel. Meanwhile, Asriel was already in serious danger. He and his snow leopard had just been attacked. The church had even hired a group of Samoyed raiders. Their goal was to stop him from continuing his research on dust. Asriel fought back with everything he had, but there were simply too many of them. In the end, he and his snow leopard were captured. Meanwhile, after a long journey, Lyra and the others finally stopped to rest on the frozen Arctic plains. That night, Lyra used the golden compass to search for another clue. This time, it pointed directly to a cabin hidden beneath the snow. Lyra was sure something important was hidden there, but it was already dark, and the adults would never let her go exploring alone. So, she secretly asked Irek to take her there. The two soon arrived at the location. In the middle of a frozen lake, a broken-down cabin stood all by itself. Lyra didn't want to alert anyone inside, so she entered with only Pan. The cabin was eerily quiet. Then, she suddenly heard someone crying. A moment later, she noticed a sack moving behind her, and inside, she found a child. Lyra recognized him instantly. It was Billy, the boy who had been missing for days. Billy had been subjected to the church's demon-cutting experiments. His demon had been forcibly taken away, and the connection between them had been completely severed. Lyra quickly took Billy back to the camp. His mother finally got to see her missing son again, but the reunion didn't last long. A cold arrow suddenly tore through the night. Everyone immediately went on high alert. The attackers launched an assault from the darkness. Irek rushed forward to protect Lyra, and took the incoming weapon head-on. Meanwhile, Lyra ran blindly through the chaos, and accidentally found herself surrounded by local tribesmen. They forced her across the frozen wasteland, and eventually stopped in front of a cave. That's when Lyra discovered why they had captured her. They planned to offer her to the Armored Bear King. Just then, Lee Scoresby arrived in his airship, but the Armored Bears were incredibly powerful, so the group decided to return and come up with a plan. Irek couldn't wait that long. He had promised to protect Lyra, so he planned to retrieve his armor, and come straight back for her. Meanwhile, Lyra was trapped inside the Armored Bear Kingdom, and she was already thinking of a way to save herself. Then, she remembered something Mrs. Coulter had once told her. The Armored Bear King had always wanted a demon of his own, so, Lyra decided to use that against him. She claimed that Irek was the first armored bear to ever have a demon, but he was too weak to be a worthy master, so Pan no longer wanted to stay with him, and wanted to choose someone stronger instead. Lyra also told the Bear King that if he defeated Irek in a duel, the contract could be transferred to him. To make the story even more convincing, Lyra used the golden compass to uncover one of the Bear King's secrets. After a little more convincing, the Bear King completely believed that Pan was a magical demon, The next morning, Irek finally returned, and the Bear King was already waiting for the fight. Lyra told Irek about her plan. She had arranged a deadly duel without asking him first, but Irek didn't blame her, because he had been waiting for this revenge for years, and to rescue Lyra. He was already prepared to fight to the end. With two deafening roars, the duel began. Two massive armored bears slammed into each other on the ice. The Bear King had better armor, and a much larger body. Irek had also just traveled a long distance, so he was completely overwhelmed at first. But years of humiliation and hatred gave Irek a sudden burst of strength. Just as the Bear King started celebrating, Irek suddenly smashed him in the jaw. The massive Bear King crashed to the ground, and the entire battlefield fell silent. The duel was over. The usurper had been defeated. Irek had reclaimed his throne, and his roar echoed across the frozen land. Every armored bear knew one thing: their true king had returned. Irek had successfully rescued Lyra, and the two of them headed toward the final location shown by the golden compass. But the ice bridge leading to the other side was dangerously fragile. It couldn't support both of their weight, so Lyra had to cross alone, while Irek went around from another direction. Lyra ignored Irek's warning, and insisted on entering the building. She pretended to be a lost child, hoping to trick the guards, but she didn't realize they had already seen her as prey. Lyra and Pan were quickly captured, and forced into a cutting machine. The researchers immediately turned it on, and the machine slowly began to close. Lyra and Pan were in serious danger. Just as the machine was about to finish the procedure, the laboratory doors suddenly burst open. Mrs. Coulter arrived just in time, and rushed forward to stop the machine. When Lyra woke up, the first thing she saw was Pan, safe and sound beside her. After making sure her demon was okay, she immediately demanded to know why Mrs. Coulter had done this. But the truth that came next was something Lyra never expected. Mrs. Coulter hadn't come only because the experiment wasn't ready. There was another reason. She was actually Lyra's biological mother, and Lyra was also the daughter of Mrs. Coulter and Asriel. Years ago, Mrs. Coulter abandoned Lyra to hide the scandal, and then joined the church's power struggle. Asriel, on the other hand, sent Lyra to the college to protect her, and raised her as his niece. But before Lyra could even process the truth, Mrs. Coulter began using their relationship as mother and daughter to win back her trust. She didn't want to see her daughter suffer through more experiments, but at the same time, she still wanted to use Lyra's abilities, and the one-of-a-kind golden compass, to increase her own power within the church. So from the very beginning, her love had always come with a powerful need to control Lyra. But Lyra didn't fall for the trap. Instead, she decided to turn the situation around, and pulled out the metal box Father Coram had given her. After everyone finally managed to open it, a mechanical insect inside accidentally attacked them. Mrs. Coulter was poisoned and knocked unconscious. Lyra immediately rushed into the laboratory. She saw a bunch of buttons and control levers, and started pushing and pulling everything in sight. After one massive mess of random controls, the cutting machine suddenly went haywire, and the entire laboratory exploded. The children's holding chambers opened, and Lyra finally led the imprisoned children out of the facility. But the moment they escaped, an even bigger threat appeared. A massive group of guards surrounded them, each one accompanied by a wolf demon. The guards unleashed the wolves, trying to scare the helpless children. Just when everyone was in danger, a massive bear paw suddenly slammed into the attackers. Irek had arrived with reinforcements, and against his overwhelming strength, the wolf demons had no chance. The witch soon appeared as well, and helped Lyra deal with the most dangerous threat. Not long after, Lee Scoresby arrived in his airship, and began picking off targets from above. Then, a huge group of Egyptians rushed into the fight. The guards completely lost the advantage, and the frozen land that had been swallowed by darkness finally became peaceful again. The children had finally escaped the church's experiments. Lyra had completed her mission, and successfully rescued her friend Roger. But this victory was only the beginning. Lyra took her friends with her, and continued her journey to find her father. High above the Arctic, golden dust swirled through the sky, and a crack leading to a parallel world slowly began to appear. The movie ends here, but Lyra's story was far from over.